is still a Hitler. Trump is still a threat to the future of this nation. Trump is still a threat to the future of the human race. Trump's supporters still divide into domestic terrorists or those who have no problem siding with domestic terrorists. And Democrats, and especially the eternally gullible, terrified media, are still falling for Trump's lies. When he hinted at uniting America, it was like the book the extraterrestrials in the Twilight Zone had, to serve man. Trump wants a united America, all right, united under his one-man authoritarian dictatorship. And Biden fell for it, and the Democrats fell for it, and the commentators fell for it. And after the big, poor, dumb fishes who always take the Trump bait took the Trump bait again, he explained what it was they had just bought. His concierge judge in Florida declared that special counsel Jack Smith is unconstitutional. And he followed with, as we move forward in uniting our nation, after the horrific events on Saturday, this dismissal of the lawless indictment in Florida should be just the first step, followed quickly by the dismissal of all the witch hunts. He even included the E. Jean Carroll cases in the cases he now expects will be dismissed. And then, in further tribute to the new spirit of bipartisanship, by which Trump means both parties should nominate him, he named his running mate, the shitbag J.D. Vance, who 2 years ago he literally could not name. He called him J.P. Mandel. Vance, who not 48 hours earlier had posted, quote, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination." Well, sounds unifying to me, JD. Like ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer kind of unifying. Oh, and just remember, MAGA, for when the time comes, J.D. Vance wears a size 16 noose. Also, Vance, the way you phrase that post, it reads that Trump attempted the assassination, which would kind of be the first thing you've ever gotten right. Because while the Democrats and other opponents of dictatorship folded at the knees over fear that they might be blamed or damaged or not deferential enough to Trump or have to answer questions, they forgot reality. Reality is, this is the America Trump wanted, and this is the America Trump gets. I'm really sorry a Republican gun fetishist shot at another Republican gun fetishist using a weapon that Democrats had tried to ban and Republicans had kept from being banned. And he did this in response to 9 uninterrupted years of the Trump language of stochastic terror, while the rest of us pleaded that he stop. I'm really sorry about this, but what exactly does this have to do with America? Trump gets shot at by a guy whose neighbors now say lived in a house that had Trump signs out front. Seems to me like this is a Trump problem. Who exactly needs to turn the temperature down? Who, President Biden, needs to turn the temperature down? Yes, let's bow to and beg forgiveness from and pledge unity with Republicans. With a man who called for his Second Amendment people to stop his presidential opponent. With a psychopath who traffics only in violence. With a party of quislings who have surrendered any remaining shreds of loyalty to our nation or our Constitution or our shared humanity. Surrendered any shreds of loyalty to any of that to this scumbag Trump. With an insensate creature whose first act after his near-death experience was to name a new running mate that he needed because he tried to get his own mob to kill his last running mate. We need to steer out of this bipartisan scam goddamned fast, President Biden, and you need to steer out of it immediately. Because I don't care now if your polls improve or they crater. You had one job in 2021, which was to remove the cancer of Trump and MAGA from this country forever. And out of foolish, but in some ways understandable naivete, you waited. And this is what you waited for. If you are not prepared to remove the cancer of Trump and MAGA from this country now, get the hell out of the White House. Get somebody a top-hour ticket who is willing to do what is necessary. Because you say unity, sir, and Trump and the MAGA mob hears surrender. And if you want to surrender, go ahead. In this unwarranted deference to a would-be dictator who was shot at by his own side, you have completely misread the mood of this nation and the urgency of this crisis and the absolute non-negotiable necessity to not back down in the face of the self-fulfilling Trump prophecy of violence, but to instead redouble your efforts to rid us of the nightmare, of the cancer Trump represents. Do it or get out. Now, genuinely, I am heartbroken for the father who died protecting his family, protecting it from the violence that is the essence of Trump's campaign and the only through line in his horrific vision for America. I am heartbroken that Trump's stochastic terrorism killed yet another bystander and wounded two more. And I am equally heartbroken that the President of the United States and other Democratic leaders should act like this is America's fault and that Americans need to turn down the temperature. The man who has been boiling us like frogs for a decade is Trump. Those who have enabled him are trying to blame those of us who have tried to stop Trump. And the idea that any of this will abate, will even slow down because of some gesture by us of neighborliness to people who want to kill us, that idea is madness, sir. I will remind you, President Biden, that no one who has treated Trump and no law enforcement authority involved on the scene or the investigation has yet confirmed he was even grazed by a bullet and not some kind of shard of debris. Only he has made that claim. And the nation's media has utterly failed, as it does nearly all the time, to verify or probe or even question another Trump boast. And my God, listen to his cult right now. You would think Trump was Christ fresh off the cross, rather than the victim, as he himself phrased it in a moment of unintentional and hilarious honesty, a victim of, as he described it, an ear piercing. And of course, those same, quote, reporters, unquote, swallowed whole the latest swindle that he would pivot. We are told, wrote the editors of the astonishingly and perpetually fatuous Politico, that this week Trump will adopt an unfamiliar, almost benevolent posture and call for unity in the face of tragedy. Yes, unity. Unity means everybody does what Trump says. Trump told a propagandist from the Washington Examiner that he has rewritten his nomination acceptance speech, that God had given him a second chance. Quote, honestly, it's going to be a whole different speech now. It is a chance to bring the country together. I was given that chance. Yes, another chance. Another chance to scam the stupid. Somewhere, Van Jones is still weeping as he was Saturday night. Happily, If Van is on CNN weeping, he can relax because nobody is watching him. Just remember, after Trump dived under the podium, not fell, not was struck down, not took a bullet, and then got back up to his feet, making sure as he did that the Secret Service retrieved his baseball cap and his loafers. The great unifier's immediate and most telling reaction was simple and direct and self-defining. We saw into his soul, or whatever he has there instead of a soul, for one moment. His face taut with rage and hate in a way even he has not previously revealed. Trump screamed, "Fight, fight, fight!" Same fraud, different con. Oh, Trump Jesus has a message for the faithful. Faith, brotherhood, unity, and fight anybody who does not conform. And if anybody is still falling for this, what you will hear next, is what an Atlanta Journal-Constitution and NBC News reporter recorded in the opening moments of the Republican convention in Milwaukee yesterday. Spoiler alert, these scumbags are not chanting peace, peace, peace. If, when they had dragged him off the stage Saturday, Trump had shouted, "Kill, kill, kill," the Republicans would have been chanting that at their convention yesterday. And by the way, no, I do not believe that this was some sort of setup. No, I do not believe Trump wasn't really shot at. No, I do not believe they were not trying to kill him. That was an assassination attempt. It's everything else that's the bullshit. As Politico wrote 8 hours before that fight, fight, fight chant was recorded, quote, "The familiar face they're nominating for president this week is a different man than they've come to know." 1, bullshit. 2, thank you, bullshitters at Politico, for reminding me. The familiar face. Go and look at those images of Trump and the Secret Service agents and the giant flags and how the right is literally comparing all those images to the iconography of Christ. And then find the photos snapped at the exact moment Trump is screaming his message of hate and fight. And look at his face with the mouth just slightly open and just the front teeth visible. And my good God, it is the face of a giant, monstrous, enraged rodent. It's Gerbil J. Trump. Yeah, so the unqualified judge and former flamenco and yoga correspondent of the Miami Nuevo Herald Trump appointed delayed and slow-walked and corruptly undermined the case just long enough that she could dismiss the charges against him in Florida for stealing the nation's nuclear secrets and classified documents and sharing them with, like, passersby. And she managed to dismiss the case literally hours before he, a convicted felon, was renominated at his anti-democracy party convention. Timed it out, she did, to the month, the week, the day, and the hour. Oh, and she did it on a basis of something Clarence Thomas threw in as an aside in the Supreme Court's corrupt ruling on this imaginary and world-ending concept of presidential immunity. The thing that will allow Trump, if we let him seize power again, to arrest you and never face any recriminations. And yes, it will be appealed. And it will not matter if Trump wins. And yes, I am dead serious when I suggest the following. Absolutely serious. Biden should invent a pretext today and arrest Judge Cannon and arrest Justices Thomas and Alito and Kavanaugh and Barrett and Gorsuch and Chief Justice Roberts and Trump and the leading Republicans and come on TV from the Oval Office and say just 8 words. Good evening. Presidential immunity. God bless our troops. In fact, he does not need a pretext. What would Trump do in a mirror image of today, a mirror image of the assassination attempt? Less than 4 months before the election, he's in charge, and the guy ahead of him in the polls gets shot at. And the Secret Service has clearly screwed security into the ground. And we don't know why a kid registered with the same party as the candidate, with the candidate's signs in his front yard, would try to kill the candidate. And we don't know why a local police officer confronted the shooter moments before the shots only to back away. And we don't know why, most insanely of all, the kid had a cameo in a BlackRock commercial for retirement plans. And we do know it is an assassination attempt being investigated as an act of domestic terrorism. And you know that a Trump in charge would look at this and say, good enough excuse for me. I am declaring a national emergency. Presidential candidates under attack. I'm invoking the Insurrection Act. Do it, Joe. I mean, right now, all the goddamned Republican terrorists are in one place. They even all have hotel rooms in the same neighborhood as the arena. Just seal it off and keep them there. Hell, it's all legal. Clarence Thomas and John Roberts and Sam Alito just told you so. Presidential immunity. And you know, Mr. President, and if you don't know, retire and let somebody who does know run in your place and run the country in your place. If you don't do something like this to stop Trump and the cancer and the now emboldened fascists, when they get the chance, they will do this. It isn't if the Insurrection Act will be invoked in the next few years. It's when and by whom. I will get back later to all the things the Trump cult said and did in the hours after the shooting that probably were a tip-off that the unity and bring the temperature down kumbaya stuff was just another con. Like the Georgia congressman who posted, Joe Biden sent the orders. But first, there is something else. Utterly maddening, utterly dishonest, utterly Pollyanna. And after we stop with the unity crap that Trump seriously thinks means dropping all charges against him, we also have to stop with the violence has never decided anything in our country lie. I don't want to hear another politician say that violence has no place in American politics. If you want to argue it should not have a place, that's one thing. I endorse that completely with all of my heart. But by this point, all I'm getting from this pious bullshit, that what happened over the weekend or what Trump has been summoning for 9 years is some kind of unheard of, unforeseeable aberration, all I'm getting from that is a deep, bitter laugh. Even Trump wrote, "It is incredible that such an act could take place in our country." No, it's not. It may seem incredible to him that such an act could take place to him. And I don't begrudge politicians who, after all, have a very vested interest in making sure politicians don't get shot. I don't begrudge them arguing that there is no room in this country for letting politicians get shot. I get it. Shouldn't shoot commentators either. But my God, the history of American politics is a river of blood. 45 men have now served as president, not 46. We gave Grover Cleveland 2 numbers for some unfathomable reason. 4 out of the 45 have been assassinated with guns. That's nearly 10% of them. As of Saturday's event with Trump, 2 of the other 41 have been wounded in gunfire while running to try to regain office. Another one was wounded by a gun in office. 7 of the remaining 38 have survived significant attempted assassinations by guns. 6 more were targeted with guns in plots that were stopped before getting nearly that close. That's 20 out of 45. 20 presidents out of a full set of only 45 presidents. That's 44% of all your presidents. It's a lot of percent. A year from now, we will commemorate the 200th anniversary of the first gun assassination of a sitting American elected official, the Attorney General of Kentucky, Solomon Sharp. State Senator Clementa Pinckney of South Carolina was one of the victims of the white supremacist Dylann Roof in 2015. Depending on your criteria, there have been 60 others in between, or 70, or 100. Then there are those who were shot and survived. Republican Congressman Steve Scalise in 2017, Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords in 2011. Then there are the leaders who were not in office, not in politics even, from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to Huey Long to George Wallace. And also, we're still using, in this context, this phrase, the peaceful transfer of power, as if January 20th, 2021 erased January 6th, 2021. And the other forms of the Trump coup attempt. And even if you want to concede that, did we have a peaceful transfer of power in 1861? When Lincoln was not on the ballot in 20% of the country during the election and the southern states seceded in protest over his victory? As well as it turned out, was 1864's election peaceful? 1868? When Mississippi, Texas, and Virginia were still occupied by Northern troops and votes did not count? 1872, when there were still troops throughout the South? 1876, when after the most controversial election before Bush v. Gore, supporters of the losing candidate, Governor Samuel Tilden, urged him to take advantage of the still heavy military presence in the Capitol and start a second civil war in order to claim the office from Hayes. Was the Civil War a peaceful transfer of power? Was the Revolutionary War a peaceful transfer of power? I am the least pro-violence person you are going to meet. I am also the least pro-sanitizing of history. If you want to aspire to an America where bullets are no longer as influential as ballots, great. But don't lie. Not now. Don't lie to Lincoln and Garfield and McKinley and Kennedy. Don't lie to Reagan and Long and Wallace and King. And don't lie to Secretary of State Robert Lincoln, please. Robert Lincoln, who was supposed to be with his father at Ford's Theater, who was walking towards President Garfield as an assassin shot him in 1881, who was on a train to Buffalo to see President McKinley as an assassin shot him in 1901. Tell Robert Lincoln that there's never been any place for violence in American politics. Perhaps, just perhaps, if we stopped lying about it to ourselves, we might, just might, be able to stop it ourselves. I'm not done on this, but I need to put in the commercials. All 3 segments today on this, including so many worse persons, these same Republicans pretending to sing Kumbaya, only they don't know the words, and many of them had to bail out after the coom. So many worse persons, I can't count them all. And more on the practicalities. No, sorry, nothing in history suggests the guy who got shot at gets an "I didn't get killed, you should feel guilty" bump in American elections. Not only don't I think this helps Trump, I don't think it has any significant impact on the outcome at all. And what little insignificant impact there is might hurt Trump. The actual history of the attempts to kill Reagan, Ford, Teddy Roosevelt, and the other candidates. That's next. This is Countdown. To continue, I have a contrarian point of view as well on the impact on the election of the attempt to kill Trump. Not only are all the headlines about how this changes everything laugh out loud wrong, probably does not change anything. It's not even the lead story anymore. It's not even the lead political story. It's not even the lead Republican story. But if it has any impact, if it has 1/100% impact, I don't think it's the one being uniformly predicted. I confess this may be entirely wishful thinking, one last optimistic cell in a body that has turned otherwise fully cynical after daily exposure to American politics for 60 years as boy and man. Or it might just be the number of decades I've been in this business and the number of new details that you and I don't know yet. We didn't know about the yard signs until last night. What's next? The only thing we have to go on is history. And firstly, the idea that this will coalesce the nation around Trump, history suggests it's nonsense. Oh, it's just like Reagan when he was shot. Heard that all weekend. Oh, it's just like Reagan. Trump's like Reagan. Look at Trump. Oh, he's going to win in a landslide because Reagan won in a landslide and he was shot. The time span between Reagan getting shot and his landslide re-election was 1,318 days. It's 3.5 years. And by the way, that landslide in 1984, after he was shot, that was only 35 electoral votes bigger than his landslide was in 1980. There were a lot of crazy reasons Ronald Reagan was popular enough to win that way without any functioning brain, but getting shot was not one of them. Also, he got shot. Maybe Trump got winged. Again, his quote, "My ear was pierced." Oh, the humanity! As an aside, when I went to double-check the exact numbers, I Googled Reagan assassination, and my new laptop malfunctioned, or it auto-corrected, or I hit return too soon or something, and I got first the results for Reagan ass. Here's a free tip for an old man, Sonny. Never do this. Okay, those who found out the actual stats on Reagan and said, well, that's not going to work. We can't even get away with that. They then said Trump was just like Teddy Roosevelt, who also got shot while running, and that was close to the election, wasn't it? Yeah. All right, the little background. Teddy Roosevelt had served out William McKinley's term after he was shot and killed. And then Roosevelt won election in his own right in 1904 and impulsively then said he would not run again in 1908. He would have sailed to a third term. Actually, his second term. Instead, his hand-picked successor, William Howard Taft, flailed as president of the United States. TR did not help. He then challenged Taft for the 1912 nomination, and when the Republicans actually did rig the convention against him, Roosevelt ran as the Progressive Party third-party candidate. On October 14th, he got into a car to go to the Milwaukee Auditorium to give a campaign speech when an assassin shot him in the chest. His speech, which was, I forget now, 100 pages thick, actually slowed the bullet down. Verbosity helps. The bullet did not enter his lungs, and Roosevelt, who knew anatomy and hunting backwards and forwards, knew he was hurt, but not mortally so. So after making sure the assassin was not harmed, Roosevelt went to the auditorium and gave the whole speech, as opposed to, diving under the podium. Not that that was the wrong thing to do. I would dive under the podium too. But the comparison between Trump and Teddy Roosevelt giving an hour-long speech with a bullet in his chest and no teleprompter, the comparison ends very early in the process. And again, dramatic, extraordinary, and just 22 days it occurred before the election, and we don't have polling, but it seems as if Roosevelt underperformed expectations on Election Day. They thought he would do a lot better than he had. Although he became the last third-party candidate to finish in second place, he still lost the Electoral College by 347 votes. Gerald Ford was the victim of 2 assassination attempts, 17 days apart, 14 months before the 1976 election. An admirable comp to what happened to Trump. Point blank, no damage. Not only did it not help Ford, who would lose to Jimmy Carter, it didn't even secure him the Republican nomination, and he had 2 assassins. Reagan ran against him, and by the time of the 1976 Republican convention, Ford was only 43 delegates ahead, and the convention, not the primaries and not the voters, decided the Republican nomination. And even after all that, 2 assassinations and Ronald Reagan trying to knock him off, he lost. President Harry Truman was shot at in November 1950, and it did nothing to help his political quagmire that was so bad he didn't even try for renomination. And when he bowed out at the end of March 1952, the candidate he endorsed, Averell Harriman, never got above 5% in the Democratic polls. I realize the most recent of these examples is just over 40 years ago, and the Reagan shooting was only 6 years after Ford, and Ford was only 7 years after Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy was only 5 years after his brother, President Kennedy. Trust me, we were not blasé about any of this, if that's what you're thinking. It is possible that the kind of collective, unfathomable guilt we have seen since Saturday night might have been worn out in 1975 or 1981 by 2 decades of relentless gunfire? But I really think the answer as to why getting shot at does not help a presidential candidate is deeper than that. In each case here, the victim of the assassination attempt represented the more violent party, the more violent choice in the upcoming election. Ford had just overseen the disastrous evacuation of Vietnam. He was connected to Nixon. Truman was blamed for the Korean War. Teddy Roosevelt was a little bloodthirsty, even in a bloodthirsty time, and Woodrow Wilson, who won, was already pledging to avoid what would become World War I. He didn't, but he pledged it. And now, there are 2 American paths sitting in front of us from this point in history, 2 American futures. Until Saturday, there was the anti-Trump path that you and I have seen clearly, where we still have elections and judges and order, and we push back against sudden, mindless, uncontrollable violence within politics and without. And the other view was of Trump's America: violence, assassination, persecution, bigotry, madness, tragedy, but all in the future. The Trumpists could deny any of it was true now or would ever be true. I don't think they can deny it any longer. An America of Wild West shoot-em-outs involving presidential candidates or anybody else, that sounds fun to these psychopaths until you are the one who gets shot. To paraphrase my cousin Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get shot in the ear. Most of the Trumpists are too far gone to correct themselves now, but I suspect there's still a patch in the middle, or maybe at the sane end of the right, in which they saw on Saturday what Trump's America really looks like. And the contrast to the Biden America, flawed, flailing, but trying, or a Democratic Party America, because I can't tell you how angry I am at President Biden right now for participating in this. Maybe I'll get better, maybe I won't, but right now, no thanks. Regardless, it's a choice, a Democratic Party America or a Trump America where everybody gets shot at, including Trump. And lastly, so I'm clear, and I can clarify for any of the Trumpists who are so obviously looking for stuff, that MSNBC took Joe Scarborough off the air yesterday out of fear that somebody on that show would say something stupid that would harm NBC. And I thought, wait, that's the premise of the show. Anyway, for those hunting liberal remarks, let me be explicit about what I am and am not saying here. Do I want you to shoot Trump? No, I do not. Do I want you to shoot anybody? No, I do not. Do I want anybody to shoot anybody? No, I do not. Do I think anybody is responsible for the rise of violent rhetoric and threats and stochastic terrorism besides Trump and the Republicans? I do not. Do I think anybody is responsible for the assassination attempt besides Trump and MAGA and the Republicans and the shooter? I do not. Do I think Trump is less of a mortal threat to representative government in this nation than he was on Saturday morning? I do not. And lastly, will I stop saying that he is intent on becoming a dictator and his election is an existential threat not only to this nation but to life on Earth? I will not. Okay, so the same Republicans whose asses the Democrats are kissing right now, the Republican Senate candidate in Pennsylvania wants the incumbent Democrat Bob Casey to suspend negative advertising. And the person he cites as his inspiration for this idiotic idea is Biden. Those same Republicans said so many psychotic, violent, unforgivable things in the wake of the shooting that I literally have lost count. Worst persons. Could be 3 guys, could be 33 guys. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown, nothing. This is the last segment of today's programming. How's that for a promo? But there's still time for all the new idiots to talk about the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. See if you find a theme. Well, after the first one. There's so many of them, though, that I've run out of precious metals with which to make the awards. So first, the humorous relief honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 15, Ian Dale, a host on England's LBC channel. Kind of a right-wing mishmash. After the European Soccer Championship match Sunday between Spain, which won, and England, which did not win, see if you hear the... it's racism, nationalism, or just plain stupidity. Spain won, England didn't. Quoting Ian Dale, what contrast between the two teams. Every England player belted out the national anthem with gusto. Not a single Spanish player opened his mouth. Ian, the Spanish national anthem doesn't have any words. If you hear anybody ever singing the Spanish national anthem, get to a hospital, you're having an episode. The 14th honorable mention, the millennials. They're complaining about this again with Trump. I mean, I get it. No matter what dates you put on them, they've all seen 9/11, Iraq, the recession, the climate crisis, the rise of Trump, COVID, now an assassination attempt. We all have our burdens, and I don't minimize anybody by generation. I just like to point out that I am among the youngest of the baby boomers. So I got all you've been through, millennials. Also, I had the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Kennedy assassination, Vietnam, the other Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King, Watergate, the resignation of the president, and then after I graduated from high school, the 13th honorable mention, Speaker Mike Johnson. I know he sounds like an FM radio preacher in a small town in the South. Hear the Bee Gees. But he's also been successful in a reptilian kind of way. But ultimately, this guy is a dope. At the beginning of this month, Ugly Tiny Johnson went on Fox and smeared Biden. Quote, unless the president is reading off a teleprompter, I don't think he's capable of making these big decisions. And then, guess what happened? Mike Johnson got up at the Republican convention yesterday, and he learned that the god of teleprompters is a vengeful god.
It is now my honor to introduce the Attorney General. And there goes the teleprompter.
And then Mike Johnson left the stage, and he has not been heard from since. And now those Republicans who immediately said something about Trump that suggested that the lie about unity and turning down the rhetoric was a lie even before they tried to sell it to us. The 12th honorable mention, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Quote, "This was an assassination attempt, aided and abetted by the radical left and corporate media, incessantly calling Trump a threat to democracy, fascists, or worse." Yes, Tim, that's right. Thomas Crooks, Trump supporter, dead shooter, was radicalized by, me. Absolutely. Say, now that you didn't get that vice presidential gig, Senator, do you have an out clause in your contract with your, quote, fiance, unquote? Just asking. The 11th honorable mention, Matt Gaetz, who also posted yesterday a photo of, quote, Supreme Court Justice Eileen Cannon. He wrote on Saturday, "They tried to impeach him. They are trying to imprison him. Now they have tried to assassinate him." Oh, sorry, Matt. Good guess, but no. He was shot by a Republican. In the they versus you construction, you tried to assassinate him. You Republicans tried to assassinate him, Beavis. The 10th honorable mention, Junior Trump, who you'll remember mocked the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband like 12 times, and who seems to have serious brain damage. Quote, "Dems and their friends in the media knew exactly what they were doing with their literally Hitler bullshit. If Democrats got their way, my dad would be dead right now." Once again, Junior, your father was shot at by a young and clearly unhappy Republican. Perhaps he was a young, troubled, gun-obsessed man whose relationship with his own father was never fulfilled, that it never had any love, it never proved to the son that his father valued him in any way. Or not. The 9th honorable mention, Eric Erickson, the conservative commentator from a family so poor they could only afford to give him the one name. On a daily basis, 6:49 p.m., July 13th. On a daily basis, MSNBC tells its audience that Trump is a threat to democracy, an authoritarian in waiting, and a would-be dictator if no one stops him. What did they think would happen? Comcast made a choice. Right you are, Mr. Meyerhofer. Thomas Matthew Crooks, with the Trump sign in his front yard, Eric Erickson, was radicalized by Chris Hayes? Shrug emoji? The 8th honorable mention, Clay Travis, the kid we today politely call Challenged, who used to write stupid things but only about sports, but he's since expanded to also writing stupid things about politics. 6:33 p.m., July 13th. I am effing furious beyond words. F every left-wing media member who's been calling him Hitler for the past 8 years. This is on them. They made this happen. I'd just like to note these people all suddenly discovered stochastic terrorism, and now they believe in it completely. Oh, noes. What I don't get here is the one advantage, and I think I know something about this topic, of starting your career in sports and then going to news is you tend to remember one lesson from sports. Don't declare the winner or describe the deciding play of the game until after the goddamn game ended. It never had dawned on Travis, not for a moment, that Trump's shooter even might have been a Republican. Yet, there it is. So I guess what Clay Travis is saying there is F all Republicans. You betcha. The 7th honorable mention, Kate Andrews in The Spectator, with one of these Unity crap pieces headlined, "Today we are all MAGA." Listen, Miss Andrews, if you want to be MAGA, go ahead. The key point is, the guy who tried to kill Trump was MAGA. The 6th honorable mention, Lauren Boebert. First, she insisted Biden, quote, is responsible for the shooting. Then she retweeted another fascist. The Dems realized it's too late to switch out their candidate, so they attempted to kill ours instead. Again, Bobo, significant them versus ours fail here. The sentence should be, the Republicans realized it's too late to switch out their candidate, so they attempted to kill theirs instead. You're welcome. And get a grip on yourself. The 5th honorable mention, Ben Shapiro. Daily, this guy trips over his own rake. How is he a power in the fascist sphere? How? A shocking and tragic day for the nation, You cannot repeatedly and endlessly label a major party candidate and former president actual Hitler, full-scale threat to democracy, without radically increasing the danger of violence in America. This danger has been obvious for years and engaged in by nearly everyone on the left, up to and including the current president. We are in a hideously ugly new era. 12:10 a.m. Sunday. October 31st, 2022. Ben Shapiro. The attempt to twist the Paul Pelosi attack into a broader story about supposed extremism and Republican rhetoric, so vote Dem, is so transparently opportunistic and pathetic. Everyone can see what you're doing, Democrats in the media, and it's disgusting. Ben is what Bill O'Reilly used to call a pinhead. The fourth honorable mention, Forbes magazine, which took a well-intended but kind of garbled piece by somebody named Sean Harper and completely pushed it over the edge with this headline: Will surviving gunfire be Donald Trump's next appeal to black voters? They've deleted it now, which is good, because if Trump finds out about that headline, he'll try it. The third honorable mention, Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia. I think he was, in fact, first out of the box Saturday with something really stupid, but it really didn't hold up well to later entrants. This was the guy who started his first campaign ad by insisting that Biden lost Georgia in 2020, and then he's shown shooting up a voting drop box. Saturday, Mike Collins wrote, "Joe Biden sent the orders." To a 20-year-old Republican kid in Pennsylvania. The second honorable mention, Lester Holt of NBC News. I told you, White House guys, don't waste your time with Lester. He loves that job. If we're going fascist, he's going fascist. Lester's that kind of guy. He's a joiner. He's a group togetherness dude. Who asks Biden about his off-the-record remark to donors about not talking about him leaving the ticket anymore, but instead putting Trump in the proverbial bullseye? Well, Lester did. Why? I don't know. Let me see how many more times I have to say this. The shots at Trump were fired by a registered Republican who's not likely to have been doing Joe Biden's Biden or Joe Biden's Biden. By the way, at MSNBC, we used to call Lester Iron Pants because he could fill endless hours without ever getting up from the anchor chair to use the little announcer's room. Iron Pants was not meant as a compliment. And while we're over here, honorable mention number one, Chuck Todd of NBC News. Quoting the promotional tweet about his piece, Chuck Todd, any one of the political developments over the last 6 weeks would be classified as unprecedented. Put them together, and it's creating a stew that could turn quite toxic if we aren't careful, unquote. Boy, there's no sneaking anything past Chuck Todd, is there? Now, the award winners, the bronze. Worse, Elon. Man, was the ketamine flowing over at Shea Musk this past weekend. The ridiculous Dave Rubin starts. Musk is here for the moronic tap-in here. First off, the first word of the Rubin tweet should have been a tip-off to him. Assuming it turns out to be true that this sick F was an Antifa member, Antifa should be labeled a terrorist organization immediately, and that should have happened years ago, actually. Musk replies, absolutely. So I guess what Dave Rubin and Musk are now saying, that since this sick F was a Republican Party member, the Republican Party should be labeled a terrorist organization immediately, and that should have happened years ago, actually. And Elon is saying, absolutely, to that. The runner-up, worser, Senator Mike Lee of Utah. This is really one of the stupidest people on the planet. These are two tweets, 8 days apart, from the same guy. In the first one, Lee endorses Musk's idea to kill anybody who opposes the Republican, I don't know how to describe it, the Republican floor showroom kind of bill that makes voting that's already illegal again. In the second, the retweet, well, you'll hear this. This was on July 5th. Musk tweets, those who oppose this are traitors. All caps. Traitors! What is the penalty for traitors again? And Mike Lee retweets this and says, I literally cannot think of a legitimate reason to oppose the SAVE Act, and the only illegitimate reasons are really, really damning of those who espouse them. So Mike Lee calls for killing people who oppose a piece of legislation that makes something illegal that's already illegal. And then, on Saturday night, statement by U.S. Senator Mike Lee. We've got to take the political temperature down, as evidenced by what happened in Pennsylvania today. We call on President Biden to immediately order that all federal criminal charges against President Trump be dropped, and to ask the governors of New York, such a gesture would heal wounds, allow all Americans to take it. Our prayers are with the victims of the shooting of President Trump and our country, except for all the people here we want to kill. I'm Mike Lee, and my hair did not fall off because my brain is in overuse. Holy crap. Going to take the political temperature down, except for killing people I don't like. I'm Mike Lee, and I'm actually been elected senator. And you know, in Utah, there's lots of things wrong with the state of Utah, but in Utah, they would look at this and go, why did we elect this guy? Where did we find this idiot? Even the Republicans would go, Joseph Smith would be really pissed off at me. But our winner, the worst Republican vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, male prostitute. I call him that because I don't think Trump actually vetted him, because he kind of said unkind things about Trump that may come back to haunt him later, and later is right now. I mean, things that I might not have said here. Or worse, things I might too have said here. As the Washington Post put it, February 2016, Vance sent a message to his former law school roommate Josh McLaurin that McLaurin has recounted publicly. In it, Vance said he went, quote, back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. According to a screenshot McLaurin shared on social media in 2022 when Vance was running for Senate in Ohio. Gee, somebody who called Trump America's Hitler, which is the people that all the Republicans were blaming for the assassination attempt? So you Republicans are saying that J.D. Vance is responsible for the attempt on Trump's life? Oh, that could be an interesting commercial for the Biden campaign. Or they could just run this Oppo research ad that has already been put in place against J.D. Vance and just, now, listen.
J.D. Vance, in his own words.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. As somebody who doesn't like Trump, I might have to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. I didn't vote for Trump because I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's obnoxious, him being really outrageous and offensive.
On Twitter, Vance called Trump, quote, reprehensible, an idiot, and Vance loves Mitt Romney.
I'm a never Trump guy.
That's the real J.D. Vance. Club for Growth Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
So, Biden campaign, all you have to do is pop on, I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message. Also, what the heck's wrong with this guy's voice, pal? The VP, JP Mandel, JD Vance, whatever the hell your name is, don't stick your neck out. Today's worst person in the world. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums, and Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. Sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Dennis Leary, and everything else was pretty much my fault, except for the guy who tried to shoot Trump. He was a Republican. That's countdown for this, the 113th day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,286th day since convicted felon and evil gerbil Donald Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the September 18th sentencing hearing. Use the mental health system. You've got it, President Biden. Use presidential immunity to stop him from doing it again while we still can. Also, Republicans, stop shooting at Trump, please. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.